I live in the state of Washington, and currently I reside with my parents in our small remote house about 20 minutes from the nearest town, and our neighbors are half a mile in each direction. It's not unusual here, as most of it is vast forest landscape, with some small towns scattered around and a few big cities. Anyways, I've grown up in that house all my life, used to the remote nature, so it never made me anxious or anything. But one incident that happened when I was 14 made me scared of our location. It was springtime, and my parents had planned a trip to Florida, and we were supposed to leave for the airport on Sunday morning. But there were complications at my dad's work a few days prior, so unfortunately we had to cancel the trip to cover for it. My parents took me to the water park that Sunday, which was fun, but I was still upset that the trip had to be canceled. We were there maybe 4 or 5 hours before strong storm clouds appeared to be heading our way. It came quickly, so almost everyone at the pool started packing up and leaving. By the time we got home, the storm had already hit us. The rain was intense, and thunder and lightning were frequent. But here's where things started getting weird. We pulled into the driveway, and immediately noticed that the garage was wide open. My dad assumed he just forgot to close it, or maybe the sensor got stuck on something on the way down and stopped it. But my mom said she was sure she saw him close it fully when she went out. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary though, so we all got out and went inside. My mom pressed the button to close the garage, and it closed without any issues. Both my parents went to the couch and turned on the TV while I went upstairs to my room. The rain was even louder at this point, filling the whole house with loud rumbling. But halfway up the stairs, I swear I heard something moving in my hallway. I immediately paused, trying to see if it was an animal or something, but there was nothing there. What I did notice, though, was that my bedroom lights were on. That was pretty odd, because I knew I hadn't even turned them on at all today, and I definitely wouldn't leave them on if I did. I wasn't too sure what to think, but I figured I must have just forgotten about the lights, or maybe there was something weird going on with the wiring, and they turned on. I don't know. I was still kind of scared, though, so I stood in the hallway for a bit before making my way to my bedroom door. Standing right outside my room, I listened, trying to make sure it was safe before entering. A few moments passed in silence before I heard something rustling. It was very faint and quiet, as if it were a small animal moving around among my boxes. I opened the door a crack, thinking I'd see a mouse or something scurrying, but I didn't see anything at first glance. I stepped in and closed the door behind me. My room actually looked completely normal and untouched. Usually, when animals or something get into the house, there are clear signs of the mess they made. I knelt down and looked under the bed and on the floor for signs of an animal, but again, I found nothing. I got up and sat on my bed, just thinking about how strange all of this was. But as I sat there, gathering my thoughts, a shadow quickly moved across the bottom of my bedroom door from the outside in the hallway. My heart stopped momentarily in fear, because I could tell from the size of the shadow that it was definitely a person. I immediately stood up from my bed, trying to figure out what to do since I was pretty much trapped in my room, unless I wanted to risk running out. I grabbed my phone and texted my dad that there was someone else on the upstairs floor. Almost instantly, the message showed as read, and I could hear him quickly coming up the stairs. I stood nervously by my door as I listened to the footsteps approaching, hoping someone wouldn't burst through it. But after a few seconds, he opened my door, looking concerned, and I immediately whispered to him what I had seen. I think he could sense the fear in my voice, and we both walked out into the hallway and went downstairs again. When we reached the bottom of the stairs, there was a loud thud from upstairs, followed by heavy footsteps running towards us. We ran to the living room where my dad grabbed a small stick he kept in the corner, but the footsteps abruptly stopped running downstairs, followed by the front door wide open. We turned and saw the door wide open with a man in the distance running away. My dad dialed 911, and they arrived almost 30 minutes later because of the location of our house. They talked to my parents and even asked me a few questions, and looked around a bit before leaving. As far as I know, they never found the person, but the general idea of why it happened because someone knew we were supposed to leave for vacation on Sunday morning was quite disturbing, because it meant it was highly likely that the person who entered our house was someone our family knew and talked about. It really makes you wonder who your true friends are. I don't often take road trips because I prefer flying if I have to go far. But due to the sudden notice about the funeral of a family member, I had to drive about 10 hours to my cousin's house. I wasn't sure how long I would stay, so I packed enough stuff to last a week and started my journey the next morning around 10 a.m. It's probably been 5 or 6 years since I drove this far, but I still believed I could make it there in a day without needing to stop at a hotel or anything. A few hours into the journey, storm clouds started forming ahead, and an hour later, I was driving through heavy rain and thunder. The road I traversed was long, through flat fields and sometimes small forests. Some parts of the road were in valleys, so all the rainwater would flow onto the road without a drainage system, forcing me to slow down drastically to ensure I didn't skid or get stuck in flooded sections. At one point, I couldn't even pass through because the road was completely submerged. I couldn't risk damaging my car or getting stranded in the middle with no way out, so I had to turn back and find another route. All of this caused the journey to take much longer than planned, and after nearly 8 hours of driving, I still had 5 hours left. The sun had already set, and I was very tired from having to concentrate so much on driving in the rain. So I knew I needed to find a place to rest before continuing the journey. It took me 45 minutes of struggling to stay awake before I found a small town where I could stop. When I say small town, I mean it literally had maybe 20 buildings in it and a few scattered farmhouses far apart. I drove around to see if there was a motel or anything, but of course, there wasn't. The best I could find was a small parking lot near a local grocery store, so I parked my car in a far corner. The town was deserted in the sense that no lights were on except for a few street lamps, and there were no cars on the road. It was somewhat eerie, so I made sure to lock my car and look around for a few minutes before reclining my seat and closing my eyes. I knew it seemed like a bad idea and that I should have known better, but it was late enough, and the rain was still pouring heavily, so I wasn't too worried about anything happening during the night. It felt safer than just parking on the side of an empty road without any assistance around if I needed it. 10 minutes later, I fell asleep to the sound of heavy rain in my car. When I woke up, I noticed the thunder and lightning had gotten louder. Scanning the entire parking lot, it was much darker than when I arrived, but in the distance I could see a figure moving towards my car. I stared at them, waiting for them to turn or go somewhere else, but as they got closer, it became clear that they were heading towards me. The rain made it difficult to see, but once they were about 20 feet away, I could tell it was a man. I started to feel very uneasy, especially since it was pouring outside, and this man didn't seem bothered by it at all, but I could tell he didn't have anything with him, so I was pretty sure he couldn't just be fixing my car. When he was just a few feet away, he started walking towards the back door. Then instead of trying to open it or break in, he placed his hands flat against the door and began pushing as if he was trying to actually push my whole car. I didn't know what to think, but the fact that he was trying to push my car told me that this man was definitely insane. I inserted the key into the ignition and started it, turning on the lights and everything to alert the person that I was there. But the man didn't even flinch. He kept trying to push as if his life depended on it. I had had enough at this point and started reversing slowly. The man followed the car a few steps, keeping his hands on it before letting go. He stood and watched me as I drove away, starting to leave the place before he began walking back in the same direction he came from. I didn't stop until I reached my cousin's house. I worked the night shift at a medium-sized hotel in my city. The main thing I do in my job is stand at the front desk and serve customers who need to check in or check out. However, most of the time, there's hardly anyone coming in or out of the lobby during the night. And when they do, they just pass through, so basically, I'm just standing there all night staring at the doors. Nevertheless, I would get angry customers complaining about something or just acting weird. But there's one particular night that still sticks in my mind. It was a regular night like any other as I stood at the front desk. There was a pretty big storm outside, although usually when it rains or the weather is bad in general, no one would come in or out of the hotel. I took out my phone to pass the time, but a few minutes later, a man appeared at the entrance. He walked past the first door and then stopped. Standing in the small area between two sets of doors, he looked through the glass into the building, made brief eye contact with me before awkwardly patting his jacket pocket and walking back out into the rain. It was quite strange. But honestly, I've been working at the hotel long enough and met so many people that I'm used to weird and awkward behavior. I assumed he just forgot his key or something and had to go back to his car to get it. However, I must mention that I had never seen this man before, although it's unusual because most customers check in or check out during the daytime, and furthermore, he didn't carry any luggage or bags or anything, so naturally I assumed he already had a room and everything. A few minutes later, the phone at my desk rang. The caller ID showed it was an external number, so I knew it wasn't from one of the rooms. I picked it up and gave the usual hotel greeting and asked how I could assist. A man on the other end of the line said he had parked in the front parking lot and needed help bringing in his belongings. He responded politely saying it's okay, but then he asked me if I could go out and help him with a small suitcase. It was a pretty strange request, but I told him that if he parked his car in front of the door, then I could help him sort out the situation. He paused for a moment and then said okay, and hung up slightly annoyed. I walked out from behind the desk and waited between the entrance doors. I stood there for maybe 5 minutes before becoming impatient. I opened the door and stuck my head out. It was still pouring rain, but I could see the man from earlier across the parking lot waving to me and gesturing for me to come closer. I felt very uncomfortable because the main reason I wanted him to park his car in front was so we could be outside the rain. Why would someone want to walk with their belongings through a storm? I brushed it off and closed the door, returning to my desk, thinking that if he really needed my help, then he would park his car in front immediately after I sat down. Even though the man entered through the door from how far away he was in the parking lot, he had to have run to get here so quickly. This time he entered the lobby and stood a few steps from the desk, breathing quickly. He immediately asked me the exact same question as he had asked me over the phone, requesting me to help him with his small suitcase. Of course, I replied with the exact same answer as I had given him before, that he needed to park his car in front. This time he told me that he had already taken his belongings from his car and didn't want to put them back. I already felt bad about this guy, but that answer made me sure that something was very wrong. I asked him if he had a room, assuring him that I needed to check him in before helping him further. He immediately became angry, as if I had insulted him with that question. He demanded that I go out and help him before he checks in because his belongings were getting wet outside. At this point, I had had enough and responded with a slightly aggressive attitude. "I left your bag outside in the rain to start. If you refuse to check in, then I have to ask you to leave." He angrily turned around, giving me the middle finger as he walked out the door. He didn't come back for the rest of the night, and when the morning staff arrived, I told them about the man. As far as I know, he never checked in. This definitely gave me chills, because now I know that he wasn't even a hotel guest and just a stranger trying to lure me into his car in the middle of a stormy night.